Uh, I had a dream last night that my teeth fell out while I was talking. So I'm just trying to make sure that they're all there, and they are. So if you can enlarge my presentation. Well, I'm wearing my love around my neck. I love owls, and let me try and tell you why I love them. So owls across centuries and histories have been revered as very fearsome and lovable animals. They've had several kinds of contradictory theories about them. They've been loved, they've been venerated, they've been devenerated. However, towards the middle of the Dark Ages, as deveneration was happening, something else happened. The symbol of wisdom, helpfulness, and the prophecy was changed to something else. So by the middle of the 20th century, when a very intelligent scientist decided to do some research on zoological research on owls, he realized that they should be returned to their rightful place as symbol of wisdom. Now, why do I like them? When something is returned to the symbol of wisdom after a long, winding path, I cannot help but compare it to something I have come to truly appreciate. Madness. Madness follows the same path that this owl has followed over the years. Madness is often considered madness until one fine day someone wakes up and realizes and akins it to something called as passion. And passion is a kind of weapon that one must always possess and be in control of. You know why? Because that's the strongest and the most powerful weapon that anyone can ever have. So naturally, when I decided that I wanted to give in to my madness, I wrote to an organization called ATREE, Ashoka Trust for Research in Ecology and Environment, and I joined them as Senior Research Associate. So presently, I'm working on urban ecology and preparing to work on ecological economics, basically policy work. But let me tell you a little bit about ATREE. ATREE is an organization of 150 that has a mission to promote socially just environmental conservation and sustainable development by generating rigorous, interdisciplinary knowledge that engages actively with academia, policymakers, students, practitioners, activists, and wider public audience. But before you think this is an advertisement for ATREE, it isn't. I'm just really proud and relieved to be working with people who care about the same things that I care about. And that cannot be something that comes by every day now, can it? Unless and until you are mad enough. But that journey wasn't very easy. When madness decided to take over, I decided to write a letter of intent to the director of ATREE, and I said, listen, I'm as educationally unfit for your organization as possible. I don't know the E of ecology of environment except for the last 1 year, and all I've been is an ardent wildlife lover. I'm an MBA finance with 3.5 years work ex in project management. But here's the thing. I have something called as passion, and enough of it, oodles of it, for the cause as a result of the project that I had done over the last 1 year. And I truly, madly, deeply wanted to make a difference. So the thing is, going back to my old, normal corporate job was completely out of the question. Especially knowing what I knew, with the knowledge that I have or had of my experiences, it was next to impossible. So normal was certainly not a question. My projects and travels had convinced me that the corporate world in Pacific did not need me anymore. I needed to work in an environment that literally needed me. When this realization came, let me tell you, I was monetarily broke. I was emotionally flatlined. Physically, don't ask me. But mentally, I was a live wire with a very, very, very clear sense of direction. Madness. But let me tell you, madness does not come at an easy price. So the problem statement was very simple, as seen by others. Here's a question that everyone around me had. Ramya has gone without a proper job for 13 months now. Her liquid savings are in the third quadrant of a graph. With decreasing eligibility in the marriage market, increasing age, and a stagnant job market, calculate the simple probability for favorable to unfavorable outcome. If favorable meant a normal job, unfavorable meant the crazy stuff she's been up to, and assume 35% sanity for Ramya. Yes, that did not make me very happy. But here's the thing about being possessed by madness. When everyone else sees madness, you see passion. When everyone else sees chaos, you see clarity. When everyone else thinks you're just particularly lost with no path at all, you see yourself or you consider yourself as a wanderer with a very clear sense of map, where you ought to be, where you need to go. So let me trace that step for you, a part of my journey that helped me arrive at my being mad. So I began to work on understanding ecological degradation in urban areas. My first project, Winged Urbaners, left me, obviously as a wildlife photographer, you take as many pictures as you can. And my perspective was full of something as beautiful as owl, of course, the streak-throated swallows. But as you begin to zoom out and use your telephoto to better uses, you tend to adjust your perspective a little. While on the top, I saw these beautiful birds, my favorite because they're considered social show-offs. They're sitting on the branches, but if I take a closer view, they're sitting above the garbage. That disturbed me. And as I begin to do more and more of this project, delve deeper and deeper into urban wildlife, here's what I saw. The streak-throated swallows, which basically regulate insect population for you, are now being relegated to some very nice, perfect living conditions just above garbage. So here's the thing. Are things any different in the wild? Just because we consider that urban ecology is now as degraded as possible, are things any different in the wild? So I packed my bags, went to as many wild spots as possible and worked with as many environmental groups as possible, just to check the extent of damage. Now, all of you have already heard and must have read and are clearly aware that forest degradation is very much a reality. Climate change is very much a reality. Now, with this, there are certain consequences. As climate change becomes a reality, so do temperature fluctuations and weather patterns. With changing temperature fluctuations and weather patterns, the animals or the reptilian world, which is largely dependent on temperature to maintain its male to female ratio, is now suffering a huge degradation or an imbalance in their ratios. What does that do? They have to be produced in controlled environments because any disturbance in male to female ratio will thereby lead to disturbance in prey predator population of reptilian world, crocodilian world, and so on and so forth. And that will in turn lead to an imbalance in the entire ecosystem. Agreed? Well, you have no chance to disagree because this is my proof. And there are enough scientists that are working on it. Now, when these animals are being produced in controlled environments, what's the next step? My next step was clearly to understand what is exactly happening in the open wild. Now, as man-animal population densities start to overlap, so do conflicts increase. As conflicts increase, so do our fierce battles for natural resources that are now shrinking. With the result that what you see in the next picture is actually a reality. If you cannot see, that is a mugger, a crocodile, a marsh crocodile that has wandered into a village settlement with people gathered all around it. Now this is a reality, man-animal conflict. As natural resources need to be shared, one needs to understand that any change in policy, any change in our understanding of the finiteness and fragility of these ecosystems can actually lead to increased man-animal conflicts. Now let's look at the next picture. I look to God for an answer. No. I just did a project called Life by the Road, and at the end of that project I had some questions to ask God. My first question was to the people that were making these idols. As I saw the idols floating in the Hussain Sagar every year, disturbing the ecosystem within that lake, I had to ask these people, why are you manufacturing them when you're a part of the greatest pollution in the city? But the answer that I got, that poverty and conservation are deeply interrelated. To achieve any kind of conservation goal, poverty needs to be eliminated. And to eliminate any kind of poverty levels in the world, conservation goals need to be achieved. Let's look at that. 40% of your workforce around the world is now consisting of tribals that have been displaced from their respective environments because of spreading tentacles of urbanization and perhaps in search of better economic opportunities. But as you keep looking into the workforce that is reporting to you on a daily basis, this is a workforce that once held and still holds the key to something called as forest secrets. Do I want them in the cities battling for significance? Not really. But as they are victims of some kind of economic degradation, you will find that the victim is actually, that once you blamed that the short-sightedness that I had for these people was then replaced with something called as understanding. I had to make leeway for the fact that poverty is not the problem. It's the same story with most tribes, even with the Irula tribe that I worked with. The Irula tribe was once the snake catcher society, was once the cooperative set up by a very noble group of conservationists, and this group set up the cooperative and the welfare society for Irulas, and eventually what you will still see is poverty. And this group is now a victim, continues to be a victim of malnutrition and other maladies. We are leaving in our wake a spate of environmental refugees. The pelicans that are living along the backwaters of Chennai are also equal environmental refugees. Now why is that? All the buildings around that backwater are now cutting into the backwater, which is a fragile connect to the sea, reducing its chances of replenishing the ecosystem. It is a threatened ecosystem. And so it's not that people are just the environmental refugees here, you also have pelicans and other waders. So when an ecosystem is threatened, you're also threatening your own existence. So when I'm talking about a backwater, I'm also talking about unsustainable use of natural resources. Now these natural resources that are, well, this place is not too far from here. When these natural resources are depleting on a daily basis, we need to get up and ask ourselves, where are our policies taking us? But of course, at the moment, at the end of all my projects, it seemed like the policies were just as damned. The damned were the deserving, and the deserving were not treated as equals. But there's something worth fighting for, because biodiversity is a living fabric of life. Can you imagine anything without it? Can you imagine not having a reverberating sense of biodiversity all around you? I cannot. So the problem statement to me read, I have traveled and volunteered at these environmental organizations, worked with animals and indigenous groups, worked on urban ecology, photographed some really amazing animals in some very amazing locations. I understand the importance of biodiversity much better than ever before. Watching from close quarters the degradation of environment, my liquid savings are in the third quadrant of a graph. Job market looks alive again, and I have an explosive passion for a lot of things that had nothing to do with the job market. What was the simple probability that I see for myself? If favorable meant to be able to do something about the things that I had seen, unfavorable, turning away without doing anything about it. Assuming 100% sanity for Ramya. Because I believed there is no justice unless all living beings have equal rights to all in the planet. So I decided to redefine normal, quit my job, and begin working for something bigger than all of us. But here's the thing, our social structure has a certain limited view of success. You will always be asked by these so-called social definers, what do you make at the end of the month? What's your annual salary? How many people work in your company? Like the number of people in your company defines the success or the intent of that organization. And so on and so forth. But the thing is that you have to step back, take a stand, pick your spot in the battle. Pick your spot in the battle, and at the end of the day, you need to tell yourself that there is nothing better than method to madness. So, thank you, ladies and gentlemen.